A suspect has been apprehended in last week's assassination of a healthcare CEO in broad daylight. But the assassination itself exposed a nefarious AI system designed to screw you out of your healthcare. Can the system ever be fixed? I'm Evan Goldstein. I'm a licensed professional engineer and a data scientist. I'm building AI capitalists to talk to the leaders and thinkers like you about navigating the new world of intelligent machines. So last week's assassination of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson has sparked a pretty intense national debate about corporate accountability in America's healthcare system. The murder was carried out in broad daylight, and it bore the hallmarks of premeditation that hint at deeper motivations beyond just random violence. The killer left behind shell casings marked with the words deny, defend, and depose. This is a grim reference to insurance industry tactics for refusing claims. While a suspect is now in custody, we still don't know much about him or if he's the real killer. But these details suggest that the killing was motivated by UnitedHealthcare's practices under Thompson's leadership. The circumstances of Thompson's death are forcing America to confront an uncomfortable question about corporate accountability and the human cost of healthcare in this country today. But before addressing these philosophical questions, we have to understand the pattern of corporate behavior that preceded the violent act. When Thompson assumed leadership of UnitedHealthcare in 2021, the company's claim denial rates were relatively modest by industry standards. Post-acute care claims were denied at a rate of 10.9%, which is high enough to raise concerns, but it's not wildly out of line with industry standards. What happened next revealed much about Thompson's leadership and his philosophy and the devastating human impact that had. Under Thompson's directive, UnitedHealthcare's denial rates tripled to 32%, more than quadruple the 7% denial rate that's maintained by Kaiser Permanente, which is the industry's largest healthcare provider. So this huge disparity can't be explained just by market conditions or industry-wide trends. It represented a conscious choice to prioritize profit over patient care and to get that profit by screwing patients rather than increasing efficiency. And it manifested itself in increasingly aggressive denial practices that often defied medical necessity and basic human dignity. Let's consider some of the cases that emerged in last month's congressional testimony. A child who was undergoing chemotherapy was denied anti-nausea medication, and it prompted their oncologist to write he said, "I have to take time away from my patients to inform you that you are idiots. This whole experience makes me want to vomit, but of course, I wouldn't dare throw up without the approval of the insurance company," which brings me to my point. Already you've decided that a child receiving chemotherapy has no reason to be nauseated. So this wasn't an isolated incident. Recent investigations uncovered systemic denial of critical care to vulnerable patients. There was the example of an 80-year-old woman suffering from 60% arterial blockage in her leg who was denied treatment unless she first completed a 12-week physical therapy course, which is a requirement that seemed designed to delay care until the patient either gave up or died. Now, these denials are often processed through an AI system that, according to court documents and an ongoing lawsuit, had a staggering 90% error rate in claim evaluations. And the scope of this malfeasance extends far beyond individual cases. Under Thompson's leadership, UnitedHealthcare faced multiple Justice Department investigations for medical fraud. Twice in a single month, the company was sued for wrongfully obtaining billions in Medicare funds by deliberately exaggerating patient symptoms to secure larger government payments. The patient comes to them, they deny care, and then they go and try to crank up the symptoms when they're going to the government to get money out of the government. This systematic defrauding of taxpayers occurred while Thompson collected a $10 million a year annual salary. And Thompson's ethical failures weren't even limited to healthcare denials. He orchestrated these aggressive denial policies at the same time as he was engaging in securities fraud that would ultimately lead to a lawsuit from the Hollywood Firefighter Pension Fund, where Thompson sold over $15 million in UnitedHealthcare stock while aware of an undisclosed Justice Department antitrust investigation, information that, when finally revealed, erased $25 billion in shareholder value, but not before he'd absconded with his funds. This represented a profound betrayal not just of his public trust, but of his fiduciary responsibility to his shareholders. So this is obviously a bad guy, right? There was a consistent pattern of moral failure and calculated cruelty. This is an executive who repeatedly chose the most harmful path to profit even while other options were available. UnitedHealthcare could have pursued efficiency through improved systems, could have reduced bureaucratic waste, or could have streamlined its operation. Instead, Thompson chose to extract profit through deliberate denial of life-saving care. The problem here is that this type of behavior even lacks apparent long-term business logic. Healthcare industry analysts pointed out that UnitedHealthcare's aggressive denial practices under Thompson were likely unsustainable, potentially damaging the company's long-term market position. So these actions that he took weren't even in the pursuit of legitimate business interests. It was just focused on short-term gains that would allow him to cash out before the consequences of his decisions became apparent. This becomes even clearer when you see Thompson's personal conduct. So despite his enormous salary and the wealth he accumulated through questionable stock sales, investors have found no evidence of significant charitable giving or of community involvement. In fact, the only notable use of his wealth appears to be lobbying efforts aimed at preventing healthcare reforms that might have limited his ability to deny care to patients. So with UnitedHealthcare covering 57 million Americans, even conservative estimates are suggesting that Thompson's policies resulted in dozens of preventable deaths every day. These aren't abstract statistics. These are parents, children, and spouses who died slowly while fighting an insurance bureaucracy designed to deny them care. And you have to think of the irony here. Healthcare's victims weren't just denied care, they were forced to continue paying into the system that was killing them. And so many of them spent their last months or years engaged in exhausting battles with insurance representatives, filing appeals, begging for coverage they had already paid for. All the while, Thompson used their premiums to fund his multi-million-dollar salary and luxury lifestyle. So violence can't ever be condoned in a civilized society, but we have to acknowledge the complete failure of our legal and regulatory systems to prevent or punish corporate behavior that amounts to mass negligent homicide. When legal remedies fail so completely, what recourse do people have? And if this sort of behavior continues unabated, as we know it will, do we actually live in a civilized society? So let's suppose that we tackle this problem the right way. Groups of citizens gather together and peacefully protest out in the streets. We have sit-ins and shutdowns, all the stuff that tell you that you're supposed to do to affect radical change. A huge peaceful revolution uses the democratic process, and the laws are rewritten to ban AI systems that are programmed to reject claims. There's a problem here. I can prove to myself beyond a reasonable doubt that the AI system used to reject claims was not programmed to honestly review claims on their merits. And that's because it was, by all accounts, 90% inaccurate. Any system, AI or not, that's 90% inaccurate is going to be immediately shut down. So was this AI system just some piece of junk that they hadn't replaced yet? Obviously not. All AI systems are designed with some optimization function in mind. And it's pretty clear that this one was designed with profitability in mind. Nobody deliberately designs a system to fail 90% of the time. So this is a similar case to the one I covered in my episode on the IRS versus poors. And in that episode, we looked at how a basic data analysis reveals that the IRS is clearly and deliberately targeting the poorest Americans for extra scrutiny and audits. Not because the individuals in question are somehow more likely to be tax cheats, but because they were less likely to fight back and they would just pay. So let's assume that what we all know to be true is actually true, and that this algorithm with a 90% fail rate was actually designed to be 100% effective at rigging the system to extract the maximum cash from people paying out, and then paying back the minimum when it came time to file claims. How do you prove that in a court of law? Beyond a reasonable doubt, by the legal standard. As I'm going to cover in an upcoming video, some machine learning algorithms are transparent and can be dissected and analyzed to determine how they're making decisions. For example, a basic decision tree, or any derivative of that, there are a lot of algorithms that use decision trees. You can actually print out the algorithm and then figure out how it's making its decisions. But if the algorithm is a neural network, the model is opaque. Sure, if you can get a hold of the software that created the model, you can look at how it's programmed and figure it out. But the program creates the model. It spits out the model as a separate entity. And then the healthcare provider can obtain that model and run the model separately. The original program itself could be destroyed and the model would still work. Or maybe it could be made in a foreign country where the United States government can't get a hold of the program by using a subpoena because they have no jurisdiction. The model itself is opaque. There's no way to really understand what's going on inside the model. So there's no way to prove the company is doing anything wrong. There is no way to enforce a law that determines how AI needs to function or the legal functioning of AI in a world of opaque AI. So we know that Thompson was accused of securities fraud, We know that Thompson was found guilty of misusing his insider knowledge to trade and sell out of stocks prior to the investors finding out about it. So we know the legal system cares about that, but the legal system has done nothing about the denial of claims that's costing lives. What this points to is a continued unraveling of American society as institutions continue to fail. We're coming into a time of increased social chaos, and some of this is actually driven by AI, as I went over in an earlier video. But it's not as if healthcare is the only industry that's set up to run like a scam. But it is the largest and probably the most corrupt, or at least one of them. In the US, the healthcare sector takes up around 17 to 18% of GDP, which is very high compared to the 10 to 11% in other developed nations. And I should point out, most other developed nations have a much older, skewed age demographic. So if anything, you would have expected more, not like half as much as we do. A lot of this can be traced back to the well-known inefficiencies within the system. And if you feel that you're getting value from this video, I would encourage you to push the like button because it lets me know that I'm making content that you want to see and it helps spread it to others. Thank you. The government counts growth in the healthcare sector as part of the GDP growth to try to provide you with the illusion of a growing economy and of progress. This is to pad the numbers during election campaigns. But in reality, taking a step back, has healthcare really improved with the astronomical growth in spending? No, it's obviously just a growth in inefficiency. The government can't be expected to step in and repair the system because healthcare also acts as an employment avenue, especially for individuals with degrees who might find it difficult to secure jobs elsewhere. It's become kind of part of the overall out-of-control growing government bureaucratic state. Thanks to its vast bureaucracy, the system has helped create a lot of middle-class jobs. So this vigilante assassination is just a sign of what's coming. Think about the remedies to this institutional failure on a personal level if you're stuck with UnitedHealthcare and having your claims denied. You can try to find a different job with different healthcare, but if you're already sick and learning about this tendency of UnitedHealthcare to deny claims, it's too late to switch jobs. We can try to change the system democratically, but the system is now so complex that elected leaders who are generally either former lawyers or former soldiers don't have the knowledge to even start to chip away at the problem. People are seeing their families die off from being denied coverage that they were entitled to, and the legal system is protecting the company. What remedy is left? When I look at the comments online on this subject, the vast majority of people are strongly supportive of the assassin. The old cliche of violence never being the solution seems to be just that. Cliche. When the assassin is lauded as a hero, it means that every narcissist with low self-esteem just has to find a CEO in a corrupt industry to go after. And there's so many of them. The United States has already suffered from an epidemic of mass shootings. So what happens when one of these characters decides that whatever industry that you're working in is evil, and they give themselves a moral get-out-of-jail-free card to take whatever action they deem necessary against you? Of course, this situation eerily mirrors the warning found in the book of Judges in the Bible. The book was written at a time after Moses had brought the people to the Holy Land, and then after he dies, his student Joshua is taken command and led the army to conquer the land, but then Joshua failed to groom a successor. So after Joshua died, there was a vacuum in leadership. We see a similar unraveling of the social and legal structure as the various tribes that made up this cohesive nation begin to bicker and squabble and fight each other. The refrain is often repeated, in those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. The passage describes a time of moral and social chaos when the breakdown of legitimate authority led people to take justice into their own hands. And we seem to be entering a similar period, one where institutional failures left a vacuum of legitimate authority and legal protection, causing individuals to define and pursue justice according to their own moral calculus. And just as the ancient Israelites were faced with consequences of this social breakdown, we now confront the specter of escalating vigilante violence as people lose faith in traditional systems of accountability. In the end, Brian Thompson's story isn't just about one CEO's moral failures, it's about a failing system that allowed those failures to destroy countless lives. And while we can condemn the violence, and rightly so, that ended his life because we know what it does to our society, we also have to condemn the violence he perpetrated through corporate policy.